There's been an attempted prison break. A Democrat senator arrived at a mega prison in El Salvador ready to free a Maryland dad. But we're just finding out he's not really a Maryland dad. Homeland Security says he's a verified member of MS-13, and he's been accused of beating his wife twice. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen was up at the crack of dawn to rescue this guy from a Central American prison.
I'm here at the airport. I'm about to board my flight for San Salvador. The goal of this mission is to let the Trump administration, to let the government of El Salvador know that we are going to keep fighting to bring Abrego Garcia home until he returns to his family.
I just landed at the airport in San Salvador a little while ago. I'm now en route into the city. Looking forward to meeting with the team from the American Embassy. The goal of my visit is to talk to people here about the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I also hope to have the chance to meet with him.
Once Van Hollen caravaned down to the mega prison, he made an announcement. He's not leaving until he frees MS-13.
Why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CCOT? Why not release Abrego Garcia today? I'm not asking him to smuggle Mr. Abrego Garcia into the United States. I'm simply asking him to open the door of CCOT and let this innocent man walk out.
The distinguished senator from Maryland flew 3,000 miles on a rescue mission to free an illegal alien gangbanger from a mega prison and bring him home to Maryland, even though his home's in El Salvador. And the president of El Salvador said, "Would you like a tour of the mega prison instead?"
I'm not interested at this moment in taking a tour of CCOT. I just want to meet with Mr. Abrego Garcia. He said he was not able to make that happen. I asked him if I came back next week, whether I'd be able to see Mr. Abrego Garcia. He said he couldn't promise that either. So I asked him if I could get on the phone, either video phone or just a phone, and talk to Mr. Abrego Garcia. He said he could not arrange that.
The president of El Salvador just told a U.S. senator, "Don't waste my time, gringo." Van Hollen's flying to foreign countries to call illegal aliens, but he never called the mom whose daughter was killed by one in his own state. All this over a fake Maryland dad. But what about the real Maryland mom, Rachel Morin, who was raped and murdered by an illegal in the same gang? Rachel Morin's mom was at today's White House press briefing. Watch.
To have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this.
Van Hollen never spoke to Rachel Morin's mom, his own constituent. But Trump has, and he did again today in the Oval.
Beautiful.
A dear friend.
She's a beautiful woman. She's been through hell. She's been through hell, right?
Oh, yes.
Your daughter's looking down proud of you. You know that. Just keep it going.
I know.
Keep it going.
It's like you said.
Stay with that one.
It's like you said, we have a purpose.
It's a purpose. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
She's proud of you.
Van Hollen disgraced himself today, but Democrats are lining up to do the same thing, booking trips to El Salvador so fast they're crashing Expedia.com. Cory Booker wants to go there too. Maybe Spartacus can talk his way into the prison. One House Democrat told Axios, quote, "I just came from a roundtable with 2 Dem activist groups, and all they wanted to talk about was El Salvador." One smart Democrat said this: "Trump's setting a trap for us, and like usual, we're falling for it." Today, we learn more about Democrats' innocent Maryland dad. He crossed the border illegally through the Texas desert, migrated to Maryland, got pulled over 4 times there, and was never deported because it's a sanctuary state. And he skipped every traffic court hearing. Garcia in 2019 was arrested in a gang sweep. He was detained in connection to a murder investigation and was picked up in a frequent gang area. According to the police report, the detective picked him up with 3 active members of MS-13, one of them ranking members. Garcia tossed marijuana out of his pocket when the detective approached, and when he was frisked, Garcia had $1,000 in cash. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat, which the detective says means they're members in good standing with MS-13. He was also wearing a hoodie with a known gang insignia. Officers contacted a reliable informant who confirmed that Garcia was an active member of MS-13 with the Westerns clique. The source said he had the rank of Chiqueo with the moniker of Chele. Now, how do we know he just didn't randomly run into these guys? Quote, officers know MS-13 gang members are only allowed to hang around with other members or prospects for the gang. Is this your average Maryland father?
There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again.
When he was brought in by the police, he admitted he was in the country illegally. He was interrogated about human drug smuggling. At first, he said he wasn't afraid of being sent home, and then he changed the story and said he was terrified. A Democrat judge held him, denied him bond because they said he was a flight risk and a danger to the community, and ruled that he was deportable. While he was in jail, he married the American woman he'd gotten pregnant and then appealed for asylum. On appeal, another Democrat judge upheld that he was a verified member of MS-13. But since his lawyer argued that his life was in danger from a rival gang if he was deported to El Salvador, the judge said he could be deported anywhere in the world except for El Salvador, then released him. But Biden failed to deport him, which is too bad for Garcia's wife because of what happened next. Garcia's wife in 2020 accused him of domestic violence, and a temporary protective order was issued by the judge. But the wife never followed up and appeared at the hearing. The next year, in 2021, she accused him of domestic violence again, and a judge issued a second protective order. This is what she told authorities. He punched, scratched me on my left eye, leaving me bleeding. He ripped my shorts and shirt off. He grabbed me by my arm. I was afraid to be close to him. I have multiple photos, videos of how violent he could be, and all the bruises that he left me. But again, she didn't appear at a follow-up hearing. This is the man who Democrats are defending.
The court ordered that the respondent committed the following acts of abuse. Once in May of 2021, assault in any degree. And on May 4th of 2021, he punched and scratched his wife, ripped off her shirt, and grabbed and bruised her. This is from a court in Maryland. So not only are Democrats rushing to defend an illegal criminal foreign terrorist gang member, but also an apparent woman beater.
After being arrested with drugs, cash, and gang attire during a gang sweep of known gang members as a part of a murder investigation, and being questioned in relation to drug and human trafficking, and being accused of domestic violence twice with video evidence, Democrats have made Kilmar Garcia their hand-picked poster child, an innocent victim of Trump's mass deportations. They couldn't have picked a worse guy if they tried. This is the Maryland dad, a Maryland senator, flew to El Salvador to rescue from prison. When Donald Trump was sworn into office, he designated MS-13 a terrorist organization. And terrorists aren't bound by deportation restrictions, meaning the judge's restrictions on deporting Garcia to his home country of El Salvador vacated. So ICE picked Garcia up, put him on a plane, and sent him home. Now, Garcia's lawyers are arguing the Trump administration should have reopened his immigration case in Maryland, petitioned the judge to lift the El Salvador restriction order, which the judge would have done because he's now a designated terrorist, and then fly him back to El Salvador. They're arguing over clerical issues, paperwork. The Trump administration is arguing this is a national security situation. If every MS-13 member goes through their own hearing, we'll never get these guys out of here. That's the argument. This is just common sense. Pick them up and send them home. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.